What's up, everybody? Live here in the control room. I wanted to do a quick master class. I was actually asked to teach a little bit on this topic, and I love this topic. Honestly, I probably should have been talking about this a little earlier in our classes. Sorry, I'm playing with the lights a little bit. But today I want to talk a little bit about how to enter into worship as you're operating. So if you're in production, you know that we are constantly having to make adjustments, and we're constantly having to gauge the quality of what we do and what we produce. So how do you do that? How do you manage all that and still have a great worship experience? What if you're running lyrics, or you're running lights, or you're running audio, or you're platform managing, right? And so really, I want to encourage everyone, it is possible, and there's a lot of people on our team that are awesome at doing that. If you look at some of our presentation people, and if you look at some of our lighting people, audio people, you can see them with hands raised and they're fully engaged. How can they do that while they're doing their jobs? Well, the answer to that is, honestly, if we look at how do the worship leaders and musicians do that? I mean, they have to sing and they have to play, but yet, they're not only entering into worship, they're leading worship too. And that's what we have to make sure we remember, that we're doing the same thing. We not only get to enter into worship, but we also have to lead worship as well with what we're doing. So I'm going to tell you a couple of things about that. First of all, one of the reasons I love this topic is not because it was requested that I talk about it, but really because part of my purpose is to encourage people to be free, to encourage artists to be free in what they create and what they do. And so I want to talk about something that I like to call the performance threshold. And when I say the word performance, a lot of times, especially in the church, we shy away from that, and it's like, well, we're not here to perform, and that is so correct. We're not. I want to show you how we get from what might seem like performing into really being free and entering into worship. So let me talk a little bit about the whole idea of performance first, okay? So my background, a lot of my background anyway, is in construction. And when you're on the job site, the work that people do is often referred to as performance. I'm going to set this down. Sorry for the glare on the lights. There we go. So, for instance, if you're a mason, a painter, or a carpenter, and you get a job, often on the job site it's asked, hey, who's performing the work? And so it's actually an old terminology that's associated with craft. And what we do in production, and what we do in music, and what we do in media, or any type of the arts, is a form of craft. In fact, what our communicators do when they're teaching and they're preaching on the weekends is also a craft. It's the art of communication. It's a craft. It's something they have to work at to get better. And so we're no different. And so if we have any desire at all to get better in our craft, the way that we can do that is to rehearse. And when I say rehearse, there's multiple ways to rehearse. It's not just coming in and pressing the buttons, or if you're a musician, just practicing your chords over and over again. You can also rehearse in your mind. How are you thinking about it? Are you spending time with God? Are you spending time worshiping God outside of here? Because if you are, you're rehearsing how to worship. You're rehearsing the act of entering into worship. Are you listening to the songs before the weekend? Because if you are, that's rehearsal. Okay, you may not be directing cameras as you're listening to the songs in your car. You may not be operating the stage curtains or the screens as you're listening to the songs in your car, but you could be thinking through the transitions. You could be thinking through how the songs are going to go. So rehearsing. And so we have to listen and we have to train as well. Thursday nights are a great time. We're doing rehearsals again with the band on Thursday nights. We're here. Come and play. Come and play with the cameras. Play with the switcher. Play with the lighting. It's here, and it's a great place to learn and train. So we need to rehearse and listen and train. And we need to be coachable, because the more we're coachable and the more we listen, rehearse, and train, the more that we develop muscle memory. There are certain things that I can do when I'm learning a song as a musician that I don't have to think about after I've spent some time with that song. Most of the time, I don't need music, because I learn the song and I rehearse it. And then it becomes natural. Then I can put part of myself into that song, because I'm not dependent on a chord chart or anything else. And with production, it's the same thing. So once you learn about your craft and learn about what we're doing and what we're producing, you can put a piece of yourself in it and really invest and enter into the worship without having to think about it. And that's part of the goal. So a couple other things to think about. As we grow in our craft, we will move from a hobbyist to an apprentice. And then we can move eventually from an apprentice to an experienced person. Again, if you're in the construction industry, that's called a journeyman. So you move from somebody, maybe you're a weekend warrior, you enter into an apprenticeship program, you learn and grow, and you become a master or a journeyman. And it's the same way here in production. We want to help people get to the next level, and that takes time. But here's the wonderful thing about it. Even when there's a miscue or a mistake, we can actually get to a point where we turn that into a moment of finesse and grace, where we can weave and bob through all those miscues and mistakes. We can navigate them and actually turn them into awesome. Here's a little secret for all the production people who are not musicians, okay? Here's a little secret. Musicians, we make mistakes all the time, but a good musician, you never know it. You think they're awesome. They might be making a lot of mistakes, but you don't know, because they have grace and finesse. They know how to go to the next part and make it seem like nothing ever happened. And in production, we can do the same thing. And so once we get to that level, when you're ready to make that transition from hobbyist to apprentice, you're studying your craft, you're rehearsing and listening and training, you get to a point where you're no longer concerned with the how. And it's in that moment that you're free. You're free to just be in the craft. You're not concerned with, how am I going to do this? How does this go? What does this button do again? And when you're not concerned with that, because you've been in it and you've grown in it and you've been an apprentice of it, then you can truly be free. And you can enter into worship during our service. You can engage in the message, and you don't have to think about all the technical things, because it's kind of like language. We learn how to speak, right? And then we go to school when we're young, so we understand how words are supposed to be put together and how to read and write. And then you get to a point where you can have a conversation freely, and you can just talk like I'm talking right now, and I don't have to think about, wait a minute, what's the right, grammar I'm supposed to use, and the right, this and that, am I supposed to, use this word instead of that word? I could just freely speak, because I have the foundation there already. All I have to do now is just flow out of my heart with what I'm trying to say. And in production and in worship, it's the same way. And so that's the performance threshold I'm talking about, because it's not about performance, but we are performing something if we have to constantly think about it, if we're not sure. But the more we grow, and I want to encourage you, we can all do this. The more we grow, the more we cross that threshold from, oh wow, I gotta figure this out, I don't know how, into I'm just flowing with it. I'm just in it. I'm in it, and it's moving, and I'm weaving through it, and I'm navigating through it, and it's something beautiful. And so I just want to leave you a couple of thoughts. When you get to that point where you're not having to think about it as much, where you're free in it, what you do becomes more and more of a reflection of you. There's a lot of people in our team that operate in that, and it's a beautiful thing. You can see them running, like I said before, running the lights, running presentation, audio, stage managing, whatever it is. And you see that they're fully engaged because they're not thinking about all the little technical details. They're beyond that. They're just engaged. And guess what? When they're running slides, when they're calling cues, when they're pushing faders, it becomes a reflection of them. And that's when you're truly creating. Because you know what your boundaries are, right? Like I know what my word boundaries are here. I'm not going to use a word that doesn't make any sense when I'm talking to you about this. I'm trying to explain things and walk you through it. And the same way with production, right? We know what our boundaries are. We know what we can't and cannot do, and we just flow with it. And so it becomes a reflection of who we are, which is a beautiful thing because art is all about, taking what God has given us and using that to make something beautiful and to reach people. And so I want you to just think about that as well as you are thinking through things here on the weekend. And if you have more questions about this, about how to enter into worship and how to be free and what we do in production, hit me up, shoot me an email, give me a call, catch me on the weekend. I love talking about this. It's something I'm really passionate about, and we'll be sharing more with you soon. All right, you guys have a great day. Talk to you soon. See you this weekend.